Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new live stream. Make sure you like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. Hit the bell so you don't miss another stream because we have a lot to get to tonight. And I'm sure that you guys are here for it. I'm sure that you guys have been paying attention to some of this recent news and developments surrounding the 2024 presidential election. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about Donald Trump surging. We're going to be talking about Desantis. Will he get in the race? When will he get in the race? And also, is he actually risking his chances in a general election, so much so as some people are saying, by coming out and being on the verge of signing a heartbeat bill with exceptions, essentially? We're going to talk about that. We'll touch on some of the down ballot races as well, because that's another thing, because some people just are so black-pilled on the prospects of 2024 in general at the presidential election. Who would be better for flipping some of these down ballot races? I think that's something that also needs to be taken into account, because you have some people that just say, oh, it doesn't matter, we're going to lose no matter what. I don't even know if that's true. I'm not a doomer so much as some other people are. However, I'm not necessarily going to be the type of person that's going to sit up here and say it's so over. There's no coming back from this for Biden, because it really seemed as if he was headed in that direction. But there's many things that are going to be able to go out there and keep him afloat. And it's going to be a close election regardless. People that say it's going to be a landslide in one way or the other way are pretty much lying to you. This is going to go down the wire. This is going to be razor thin. And I think a lot of people know that. So we're going to touch on all of that in this stream. Make sure you guys like the stream down below before we get started. Also, new updates to the channel. We're going to be trying to go live 3 times a week. And I'm sure you guys know I didn't go live on Sunday because it was Easter. I'm not going to be going live tomorrow because I'm going to be putting out a video. So we did the typical Tuesday stream on a Monday night. We'll also be doing a stream on Thursday and probably on next Sunday as well. If there's a day that there's just not enough to put in a video, we'll do a live stream. That's how it's going to go from now on. We're going to keep the content coming. There's no excuse for not putting out daily content in some way, shape, or form. Also working on some new content. I want to make some videos this week. A lot of people are asking questions about how should the conservatives approach this abortion issue after Roe v. Wade has been overturned and after the midterms, which I think that some people will blame Roe for the midterms a lot more than they need to. And we're going to cover some of that in this stream as well. But beyond that point, we're also going to be discussing and we're going to be touching base on the Florida question, because some people are asking, what's the real reason Florida is becoming a Republican state? And some people will say Ron DeSantis, especially the DeSantis 2024 people. A lot of the people who are like never DeSantis will say it's just always been that way because of Republican leadership at the state level. The answer is a little bit more complicated than either one. And it's really something that could end up dooming Republicans in some of these other states. You have all these people from Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania moving down to Florida. What does that actually do? It makes Florida a redder state. It makes Florida pretty much solid red. You have a lot of boomers, etc. But at the same time, the states that they're leaving that have been trending right and maybe are still to a certain extent kind of holds them back a little bit and kind of hollows out the already hollowed out Rust Belt even more. Instead of economically, it's politically, which then in turn will mean that it will even more so be economically. Not like a lot of the establishment Republicans up there even care about answering those economic needs, but that's beside the point. We'll be covering all of that. But speaking of Florida, I think it's very important that we touch base on the Republican primary in the state of Florida that will be between Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. And what we see there is there's this new poll. And some people will say this is an internal poll, so it doesn't count. It doesn't have any credibility. It just needs to be thrown away and cast away into the garbage. And that's not entirely true, and I'll explain why. It's not true because this is not the only poll that has showed this thing actually happening. It's not the only poll that's shown it. Second of all, There's a large sample size. There is a very large sample size. And third of all, the same poll showed Ron DeSantis winning back in November over Donald Trump by approximately the inverse of what this shows in a two-way race. So you do the math, you look at the numbers. It was 47-37 DeSantis. Now it's 47-32 Donald Trump. And it just all around shows that even in Florida, which should be DeSantis, one of his strongest states, you might say Utah, Vermont, Washington, D.C. I mean, Trump is up big in Utah. I don't know about Vermont. He probably is going to lose D.C. to Ron DeSantis because that's basically how the people in D.C. operate. They are the Beltway. They are the swamp, etc. We know that. They don't even count on the map. You look at how many Republican votes exist in Washington, D.C., even in a general federal election. What, it can't be any more than like 10, 15,000. I don't know the exact number, but it's not really like the D.C. primary holds any weight. And if DeSantis can only get by in that, and yes, things change, they'll say he's not in the race yet. But I mean, in Florida, the guy's got universal name recognition and a lot of free media coverage. He won big in the 2018 midterm or 2022 midterms. He won by almost 20 points. Everybody in Florida who's going to answer a political poll knows Ron DeSantis and thinks that Ron DeSantis is probably at this point going to be running for president, or at least they understand the possibility of Ron DeSantis running for president. And even so, in that same poll, what is he getting? Is he winning? Is he even getting a plurality? No, he's down there at 35. And to my knowledge, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, Florida is a winner-take-all state in the primary. And so are a lot of these other states, even Texas. Trump took the lead in Texas. That's not a winner-take-all, or at least it wasn't in 2016, but there is a delegate threshold that you have to clear. And I'm sure DeSantis would to a certain extent, but Trump would get the lion's share of those delegates. And then you look at Florida, Trump would take everything. What is the pathway for Ron DeSantis other than just staying in this race, wasting time, wasting money, wasting resources, doing his own political career, and dividing the party out of selfishness because he's taking the establishment bait that these people are giving him? Whether you want to say he's cut from identically the same cloth or not, doesn't exactly matter. I will say that Ron DeSantis is like your old school politician. He's like, you take 2012 Romney and you put the new operating system in, you upgrade him from Windows Vista to Windows 7. It's like, okay, well, you know, it's a little bit more with the times at the time, maybe less bugs, less just unforced errors, whatever that will doom you among your own base. But the bottom line remains the same. The establishment's rallying behind him for a reason, whether you think he's a good governor or not. And I think that he is a decent governor. I think most people would agree he's better than most Republican governors in the entire nation. However, let's not fool ourselves here. That bar is relatively low. But that's beside the point. I'm not going to sit up here and go on a tangent just trashing or diminishing every single thing that Ron DeSantis has ever done, from the time he set foot in Tallahassee back in early 2019 to whatever he did this morning. Doesn't exactly matter. But what I will say is that when you're talking about this presidential election and you look at these primaries, Donald Trump, he's out there. And when he's not posting on Truth Social at 4:00 in the morning, making a few spelling errors here and there, which again, nobody really sees those outside of terminally online folks, at least not now. He's relatively on message. And you could watch him speak at his rallies. You could watch his policy videos that he's released that have been extremely comprehensive. You look at that, he's already running. DeSantis is campaigning for an election that he's not announcing his run in for a reason. Everybody knows he's going to Staten Island. He's holding events there. They're not really that packed. He goes to Iowa, which is the first state in the primary. Why is he in Iowa? Exactly. If he's going out there and he's just not campaigning. Like, come on. Oh, it's a book tour. Yeah, why is he releasing a book? A very generic titled book. I haven't read the book. I would like to read the book. You have to understand what's in it. It might outline what a a presidential campaign is going to look like. If you don't want to give him money, you could probably find a copy at like a local library or something. I understand why people wouldn't want to buy a book from somebody that they don't want to win a nomination politically. Understandable, but still, beside the point. I think it's important that people read it, but from what I can tell, the title is kind of generic. But that you could even say is nitpicking. But what is not nitpicking is this poll, because there's more polls in Florida that show this. And the polls at the time of the midterm elections, or the time after the midterm elections, the ensuing month after, they did not show this in the slightest whatsoever. DeSantis was trouncing Trump in a lot of these state polls in Iowa, New Hampshire, Florida, and that was at Trump's lowest. So as long as Trump doesn't shoot himself in the foot time and time again, and Ron DeSantis runs a perfect campaign, and by what I mean shoot himself in the foot, I'm not talking about the typical like Rhino or resist lib take on Trump shooting himself in the foot. Like, Trump said this thing that's controversial, that's actually true, whatever. No, I'm not talking about that. What I am talking about is just him going out there and not being on message the whole time. And it seems like he's just a bitter old man that's yelling at a cloud, which has not been what his campaign has been about. And a lot of people will try to cast him off that way. And I don't exactly see that as the case most of the time, because they only choose to highlight the things that they don't like about him because they want to change the trajectory of the race. A lot of them are establishment Republicans. They don't really vibe with Trump. They look down on Trump's base for various reasons, even if they may agree here and there with Donald Trump on policy. And I think that that is a big part of the problem as well. But it is definitely an elitist thing. But also when it comes to policy, yeah, they don't really like the more populist direction that the Republican Party has taken because of Donald Trump. And they see DeSantis as somebody that will go out there, he'll fool the masses, he'll get the MAGA base out, they'll think he's like a populist or whatever. But at the end of the day, they know that his administration will be staffed with a lot of the traditional country club Republican types, and his administration will be probably, I wouldn't say it's going to be as bad as a Bush administration. You could thank Trump for moving the Overton window based off of that, but it's not exactly going to be this thing that drains the swamp. And you might say, well, Donald Trump didn't do that. And I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. If Trump didn't do it, what makes you think that Ron DeSantis, a career politician, is going to go out there and face the same deep state and just drain them? There's a reason why they're not exactly going off and they're anti-DeSantis at the same rate and capacity that they just spend time slandering Donald Trump. There's a reason why Donald Trump is facing legal repercussions at this very moment, but Ron DeSantis is not doing so, because they both committed zero crime that was outlined in the supposed crime that Trump had gotten quasi-arrested for, arraigned for, indicted for, whatever you want to call it, because it doesn't exactly matter at this point. But you look into it. Can't beat him in Florida right now. Maybe things will change, but the Florida primary is late. Can't beat him in Iowa. They had a poll come out of Iowa they were touting, or they were celebrating, that had a sample size of like 190 people in Iowa, and DeSantis was within 7 points. And like, I think the same poll had him winning like a couple of months ago in Iowa. And it's like a very awful poll. And it had such a small sample size. And even then Trump's gaining in that poll, and they tried to pass it off as a victory. And it's like, no, if you're going to be losing Iowa by that much already out of the gate, and this is a state that Donald Trump, he did the tariffs. A lot of people said that would hurt the farmers, but the farmers rewarded him by moving even more to the right in the rural counties. And it's far deeper than that. The trend was entirely statewide to the right. Whoever the nominee is, especially if it's Trump, at the general election level, it's going to be voting right by more than 10 points. Unlike in Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania, you actually have a relatively competent Republican state party and a competent operation going on in the state of Iowa. That's why you saw successful midterm results there compared to some other Rust Belt states. But still, you look at that, then you go to New Hampshire. New Hampshire, that's an open primary to the point where if you have enough crossover support for somebody like Ron DeSantis, he may be able to go out there and pull it off. But at the same time, you do have a very strong primary base that will still likely come out for Donald Trump, as they did in 2016. It's ironic because Trump lost Iowa, partially because he wouldn't debate in 2016. Then he went out there and he shellacked everybody in New Hampshire, especially if the field is not cleared by then and you still have the Haleys and the Hutchinsons, and I don't know who else will jump in, like the Pompeos still in the race. Then at that point, you look at a state like New Hampshire, yeah, and maybe Pence as well could throw his hat in the ring. That would ultimately just doom somebody like DeSantis. And Haley's going to stick around until South Carolina, regardless, more likely than not. So you look at it from that point forward, and it's like, okay, well, South Carolina is probably going to go to Trump. Nevada is probably going to go to Trump. He's up in every poll that's been conducted recently in nearly every swing state. Whenever he's been going on the offense against DeSantis, he's been gaining in the polls. That was even before the indictment, because DeSantis mainly had been this unknown entity that gets all this positive free press from conservative media. Now that his record is under scrutiny, and you look at his record at the national level, you're hearing more rumblings about him wanting to cut entitlement programs, being pro-free trade, mixed foreign policy record, to say the least. And he will, give different answers to somebody like Tucker on Ukraine that'll give to Piers Morgan on the issue of Ukraine, where he'll use the same old tired taglines of McCain and Romney about the gas station attendant with nuclear weapons type of rhetoric against Russia. And then he'll go, when he's talking to Tucker, he'll say, well, we don't need to like Russia, but then we don't need to push them into the direct hands of China. So it's like, what is it, Ron? What is it? And like, these are all things, I don't believe that it's mutually exclusive to say somebody like a Ron DeSantis cannot be considered a solid governor or praised for his efforts at the statewide level if they are deserving of praise. I'm not saying that we deserve to overrate it or that we cannot critique it, because there is legitimate criticism in his gubernatorial record along the way. And obviously it's been under the spotlight, and that's for good reason. Because if he's going to be running for president, we better know all the ins and outs of his faults and his flaws. And you might say he's better than everybody else in the race besides Trump. Yeah, I mean, that might be true. Although if you're dealing with a field of Nikki Haley's and Asa Hutchinson's, whatever, I mean, it's pretty obvious to tell that, he'd be the best pick of that bunch. But look at who's trying to get him to run against Trump. Look at the reasons. He's going to have to repay those people with favors because they're the ones donating a lot of out-of-state money. And you look at what is going to happen from this point forward. And what is the attack line going to be against Donald Trump? It's very hard to attack Donald Trump unless you are objectively like to his populist right or whatever. If he's going to be going out there attacking Trump, it'll either be half-truths, so look like a lot of these 2016 Republicans that were attacking his like past stances on this issue or that issue, mainly social issues like abortion and gun control, where he had a mixed record because he wasn't really in politics, or they'll just sound like total resist libs and they'll just say, oh, they'll imply that he's a dangerous threat to democracy or whatever. And it's not like DeSantis can even like attack him on anything without a proper retort being levied in his direction either. Name one issue. I mean, you might talk about the lockdowns and Trump will get criticism for it, but at the same time, DeSantis lockdowns at one point were relatively popular. They had like 70%, 80% approval mid-2020. Didn't mean it was the right thing to do, but politically speaking, you could have seen massive dividends. If Trump fired Fauci, there's a chance he would have gone out there, lost North Carolina, potentially Texas as well. Maybe that's pushing it. But you look at that, even DeSantis, when he decided to open everything up, that wasn't even a full open up in July of 2020. His approval rating shot down into the 40s, and people were saying that he probably may not be the favorite at re-election. So there's a lot of things there. We don't have to cover them all. But what I will say is you look into the ins and outs of these little details here, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute. This is probably not going to be like a war that Ron DeSantis is going to be able to go out there and wage and win, regardless of how much money that he's going to be pouring into the airwaves between now and the initial primary. So honestly, I don't even know if he should run. I don't believe he should run for the sake of party unity, among other things. And this is also true. I'm going to pull this up on the screen as well when I get a chance, because I feel like this is important. Donald Trump, his Truth Social statements on the matter are a little bit of a mixed bag, one could say. Some actually, I think, are very, very insightful. It's like they're taken directly out of my mouth. Some are funny, even if they may not exactly move the needle. And then some are like kind of questionable, like, why did he exactly post this? Like, I have to check and say, is this actually real? I don't know what's going on. Like when he put the Truth Social post out about Young, and he called him Young Kim or something the other day. I don't even know what that was, but that was a head scratcher, I will say. I didn't really vibe with that one, but it's beside the point. Doesn't matter. This is a very good statement right here. He goes on to say, Ron DeSantis is a young man, which, again, that's interesting. He's calling him a young man, which, again, I think a lot of people would say that the one issue with Trump is the fact that he's going to be 80 or whatever, but that's beside the point. He says, who is not doing well against me in the polls. He's not, to put it mildly, exactly. I believe that if he decides to run for president, which will only hurt and somewhat divide the Republican Party, because that's exactly what it does. You are taking a party that already has a de facto leader, and you are saying, get away, let me get in this tug of war. No matter who wins the nomination, if this is a brutal primary, the GOP is going to lose to Joe Breezy come November 2024, and it's going to be an utter disaster, and there's just going to be more civil war within the party. Doesn't matter exactly who wins that primary, but that's what's going to happen. And the sooner the Republican Party is unified behind one nominee, it's probably going to be Donald Trump, the better. You look at what happened in Arizona. You look at what happened in places like Wisconsin in the gubernatorial race, and plenty of other primaries like Pennsylvania for the Senate race. There's other reasons why Republicans lost those races, but especially when it comes down to a state like the Arizona primary, because, yeah, Tim Michaels, he's lazy, whatever. Oz, not the best fit for PA, among other things. And obviously you have the mechanics issue in all three of those states with Republican turnout. But still, when it comes down to it, if you have a very divisive primary between an establishmentarian candidate who spends all the resources that could be used to get the better candidate, who's better on policy, but a little bit more of an outsider, over the top in the November election, you just waste all of them attacking them, making them seem unpalatable to the general electorate when crunch time comes. It's not going to happen. 2016 worked in the favor because the Dems had their own issue, which they didn't have in 2020 because they cleared the field early. Now, if Trump basically just gets the nomination handed to him, starts campaigning for the general election come February of next year, and goes out there, does all these rallies again, he's got all the time in the world, I can't see him losing. I really can't. But if you're going to have this divisive primary, you're going to spend all this money and resources against him, it's not going to end well. It's not, because then you need to get your whole base on board, everybody from there on board. And it's just not going to have the effect that they want. And Trump is 100% right. It will divide the Republican Party. I wouldn't say it would somewhat divide. I would say it would seriously divide. He will lose the cherished and massive MAGA vote, which is real, by the way. Donald Trump has a unique base, and you're going to have to turn them out if you want a chance in hell at winning an election. And DeSantis has had the luxury of having that by his side, and he's, expanded the coalition in Florida, which is a lot easier to do as an incumbent governor than it is somebody who is running for a higher office 100% of the way. But it is true. He's not going to be able to successfully run for public office again if he is viewed as this traitor, if he goes down in flames. And imagine if Trump defeats him in a primary, somehow against all odds, with a divided party, manages to go out there and win a general election against Biden. He has that torch once again. DeSantis will just be seen as another Mike Pence. He'll be seen as another loser. Best case for him is he'll be seen as like a Ted Cruz type, and he will get on board with Trump before the election. But even then, he's going to lose a lot of his initial grassroots support, just like Ted Cruz did among the Tea Party folks. And now I don't really know anybody who's like a diehard Ted Cruz fan that's not just a total LARPer. I mean, that's pretty much it. So let's see. If he remains governor of Florida, which is what Florida voters assumed, which is true, it didn't seem like he was going to run until right after the midterms. And then it's like, oh, well, he won Florida big as an incumbent governor. Guess he's going to win the nation, right? No, it's not how it works. It would be a whole different story, just saying, but who knows? Some people took that as Trump was saying that maybe if he doesn't run, or if he didn't want to run, that Trump would make him his VP. Obviously, one of them would have to change states, presumably Trump, where he has more property and he's not an incumbent governor. Obviously that would be a very good thing for party unity. Desantis is a VP on Trump's ticket. I don't think the base would have much of an issue with that, other than the fact that he's not really that good of a debater, and the VP is very useful for that. And you'd be taking a popular governor within the party out of their state, and you would be putting them in a figurehead role. But besides the point, you look at it, DeSantis just has no business being in the race. He doesn't. I don't believe he does. And he really does. I guess you could say he views it as a now or never type of thing. Oh, he'll be out of office in 2028. He'll be forgotten by 2028. You will hear them say these things. My problem with that is he does not have a chance now. He's just dividing the party now, and it's completely and totally useless. He can't win this primary. If he does, I'd be very surprised. I would be extremely surprised if he wins the primary. And I know that Trump is no guarantee to win the general against Biden, even as unpopular as Biden is, partially because of the fact that the establishment will do everything they can do to sabotage him, even in a general election, which will not be a good thing at all when it's all said and done. So anyways, guys, like the stream, subscribe to the channel. We'll get to super chats in a minute, but I do want to get to this heartbeat bill stuff. And then we can touch base on some of the more down ballot effects of 2024, because we have a lot to talk about over the next year. I think it's important that we just cover it in doses. But let's go back here. Yeah, okay, I put this thread out because DeSantis essentially has the opportunity to get a major conservative victory in the state of Florida, socially speaking. And what that is the fact that he has a 6-week abortion ban bill that will be on his desk. And there are exceptions that go up to 15 weeks for incest, rape, etc., life of the mother, you name it. But still, like, you have a lot of people, even in the DeSantis side of things. See, I'm going to defend Ron DeSantis here for the D-simps that are watching. And a lot of them were trashing him for the possibility that he would sign this. They said he'd be the theocratic guy or so. I don't even know what big words they're trying to use that mean absolutely nothing to the majority of the people. It's the right thing to do, first of all. It'd be the right thing to do. And you look at other countries in Europe, let's even just take the objective. Let's take all the emotion out of this debacle. Okay, let's take all the emotion out of the abortion debate. Let's just look at the raw facts and what the standards are worldwide. And you look at Europe. Western Europe is very socially liberal in a lot of regards, even more so than the United States is, which is not a good thing. But even there, like, the average abortion limit is the first trimester. After the first trimester, maybe very few exceptions, abortion just does not exist. And you might say, well, the majority of the abortions in America happen before then anyways. And like, that's true, but that kind of misses the point. You have so many of them to the point where you have, tens of thousands of third trimester abortion. Baby can feel pain, potentially survive outside of the womb in many cases. And you've even had governors of places like Virginia before Youngkin took over and New York come out and basically give a half-hearted endorsement or show ambivalence towards after birth abortion, not even partial birth. And Trump actually hit the Democrats very effectively back in 2016 on the debate stage on this. Trump was kind of seen as this, like, I guess, abortion agnostic type of guy. He didn't really mention it a whole lot, but he was vehemently attacking Clinton on the debate stage over late-term abortion. And he said it's going to go back to the states, but we're not going to allow this sort of thing, which does, I mean, that to a lot of people in the middle who may not care a whole lot about that issue, that is like, they view it as a common sense sort of thing. Now, does it go far enough? No. Obviously, you have a lot of depraved people in this country, morally speaking. We have a culture that is a total disaster, and we need to work on moving the Overton window. But politically speaking, you can't be afraid to go on offense on this issue. I've seen so many awful takes from a lot of, awful conservatives out there that say, "Oh, it's over. DeSantis is going to make himself." They say that he would make himself more unelectable than Donald Trump, which is pretty funny because they already view Donald Trump as somebody who's going to lose Texas and lose North Carolina. And he'd even drop his margins in Ohio and Iowa or whatever, because they just don't understand politics. They live in their own little bubble. But that's beside the point. You look at this and you see even public polls, opinion polls about heartbeat bills back in the whole Brian Kemp debacle in early 2019. And it was 50-50 for the most part. And that was a lot more of a restrictive bill than whatever Ron DeSantis is trying to pass through in Florida. But beyond that point, Brian Kemp won re-election big. DeWine also employing some form of abortion restriction, maybe not as restrictive, but he won by 23 points in Ohio. Ohio is typically seen as a little bit less of a pro-life state historically than a state like Georgia, even though one could say the Overton window is moving, it's changing, etc. Florida is a state that is not exactly that pro-life overall. I would say it's more pro-abortion than other swing states, even though DeSantis is molding the state in the right direction in terms, or it's molded itself in the right direction as well, based off of who's moving there during the DeSantis era, we should say. But you look at abortion restrictionists, they won big. Even in California, it moved right. You can't exactly say Roe was the cause for this. Maybe you could say like Midwestern governors, the liberals were energized in places like Madison and Ann Arbor. That's true, but it's not exactly enough to explain the underperformance. There are many factors at play here. You have a lot of low propensity voters that just did not turn out to vote. And it is also true that conservatives don't go on offense about this issue enough because they think that it's a losing issue. And it might be to come out there and say, yeah, we need to ban all abortion, whatever. That does not have 50% support. It does not even have 40% support. It probably has like 30 something. But you can go on the offense because the Democrat position on abortion is objectively less popular than the main Republican position really has to be marketed as. You look at what they're supporting, late-term abortion, like what percent of the population supports this? Like 20%? Not even. And even they don't even know the full effects of it. They're just dumb or evil or both. But that's beside the point. What we do know is this is not going to affect the general a whole lot because this is an issue that probably is not that much underwater. Dems are going to be fired up on the issue anyways to a certain extent because of the Supreme Court. That's like all they have. It doesn't matter if Trump is the Republican nominee or DeSantis. I can't even believe I'm sitting back here. I'm defending DeSantis's electability, but this is not going to be his main problem. And he should sign this bill, objectively speaking. Divisive primaries and funding, they mattered a lot more than Roe getting overturned and the Dobbs v. Jackson decision. I'm not saying that didn't move the needle a little bit here and there. It definitely energized Democrats, and Republicans kind of didn't really know how to navigate the issue. But is it a top 5 reason why the Republicans underperformed in the midterms? Not even. Is it top 10? Maybe. Top 7? Or probably around there. But there's a reason why in my great midterm autopsy documentary, I didn't even mention it once. I mean, we touched on certain candidates' stances or comments here and there. Those can be sound bites that are played and definitely affect some like independence or whatever. But still, beyond that point, it is possible to go on the offense on the issue and win. And if DeSantis vetoes this bill because it's unpopular or he'll have his popularity dip, by the way, it's going to happen anyways in Florida. If he's going to be running for president, regardless, I think that if he declared like before the midterms or said that he probably would, he would not have won by 19. He would have won by a lot, but he wouldn't have won by 19 and change. But still, even though DeSantis is not my pick for 2024, he should sign the bill. And if he doesn't sign the bill, he's done. He's done in a primary. It doesn't matter what Trump's stance is on abortion, whatever, he's done. Because then it's like, oh, you couldn't do anything in your state. You couldn't even pass like a full on constitutional carry bill that's fully authentic, has open carry, etc., with your supermajority state legislature. You couldn't pass through any abortion restriction in Florida. Yes, there are some like Republicans who are fine with legal abortion. They're probably the less religious ones. They exist, but still, that's not going to be enough to get you through a primary. If Donald Trump had his 2000 abortion stance on policy or just in rhetoric, he would not have been able to win the Republican nomination back in 2016. And some people may say Trump personally may have a different opinion on the issue than he does politically. But at the same time, I mean, going just looking at his record and how he governed as a president, well, you look at it there and you see the fact that it was mainly because of him that Roe v. Wade got overturned, a major conservative victory that we haven't really gotten in decades, which is a good thing. Now, there's going to be some blowback like there is for every single major victory. You're going to see some blowback here and there from that. You're going to see some states probably vote to codify Roe in their own constitutions where they're going to make it legal and you can't change it, whatever. This is definitely going to be a fight that is going to be not fully won for quite some time, but also losing that momentum and being complacent kind of causes that as well. And the pro-life movement as a whole has been thrown in disarray, and a lot of conservatives don't know how to navigate the issue, but they say, oh, this is so unpopular. It's so unpopular to have, I don't know, like a second and third trimester abortion ban. Like, I don't really believe that's the case. And if it is, you really suck at marketing. You really suck at marketing. And you look at what happened in Georgia, Texas, all these states for the midterms where Dems spent a lot of resources trying to fire up their base against the incumbent governors, in South Carolina even, where they ran their old star moderate representative, fake moderate, by the way. He got decked by 17 points to somebody who is definitely to the right of Ron DeSantis, one could even argue. It just doesn't get talked about a lot because he's in South Carolina. But the incumbent governors that were Republican went out there and overperformed. Zeldin had a voting record in Congress that was relatively pro-life. Didn't really affect him too much in his massive overperformance up in the state of New York. So you look at pretty much all of these different things. It was not a major issue that doomed Republicans in the midterms. It wasn't. This is not going to be something that dooms DeSantis in and of itself. If he's going to sign this bill, it's probably going to help him in the primary. It's not going to hurt him in a general either. Those voters are likely going to be fired up on the issue anyways. They're not voting for DeSantis, and DeSantis is probably just going to sit up there with his arms crossed and say, oh, well, it's a state issue anyways on the debate stage, or say like, I oppose late term, whatever. But he's not going to get there because he's not going to win the primary. But if he vetoes this bill, he's done. He's not going to win the primary. He has like 0 chance. The 10% chance he has, less than that now, which probably was 20% before this whole indictment thing happened, that's down to probably single digits. It's going to go directly to 0 because then he's just going to look weak, and all of the criticism that's being thrown his way by the Trump camp will basically come into reality. It's like, oh, you couldn't even pass a second and third trimester abortion ban. You couldn't even pass a heartbeat bill. Brian Kemp, who a lot of people view as like this rhino guy, he did it up in Georgia. He did it a while ago. Didn't exactly affect his reelection chances, ran against the same candidate. So a lot of other factors at play here. It's not always gloom and doom on the issue. You just have to know how to navigate it, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to get to all of these super chats here because you guys have a lot of them. If you guys want to send in more, feel free to send in more. We have 500 live viewers. Like the stream, subscribe to the channel. We got a lot of ground to cover here. Lions 1956 says Herschel Walker should run for president. Haha, very funny. Ben Sinek says, I think 400 plus landslides are impossible now thanks to polarization. I just don't see it for either side at the moment. I agree 100%. Sam Madsen said, a friend of my family who is a hardcore Republican just moved to Florida. Ugh, yeah, exactly. And you have too many of these people doing this. And I get it to an extent. I'm kind of a hypocrite in a way, one could say, because of the fact that I'm from a Rust Belt state, moved to a more Republican Sun Belt state, even though I probably will want to move back up to the Midwest at some point. So maybe I'm not exactly as hypocritical as I may initially have sounded, but still, like it needs to be slowed down. That part is true. Papa Tango says, on a scale of -10 to 10, how biased is the media? -10 being most Dem favorable and 10 most Republican favorable. I think -8. If it were -3, Republicans would win easily. Well, that's a big part of it. They have to drown out any form of counter narrative. They have the entirety of media, academia as well, the studies that they produce and throw out there like they're Pokemon cards. How do you think they come to those conclusions? Any science that they just, can easily disregard and throw in the garbage can is going to be what they don't exactly vibe with, what they don't view as something that fits the narrative. There's a reason why you'll see studies that produce all kinds of nonsensical things these days in universities. And it goes beyond that. I wouldn't even say it's -8. I think it's -10. Sometimes they may portray themselves as if it's -8. Maybe if it's 10, one could say, to the right, if that person's going to be like Mitt Romney and they're going to have them on, even though when Romney was running for president, it was probably like -5. So definitely Lions 1956 is doing an alt history video of Hillary won in 2016. Oh, that might be actually something that I've considered in the past for various reasons. I've read this forum on like the future timeline of America, but it was actually if Trump lost the 2016 election to Hillary, and then you see the transformation of the Republican Party still take place, but it's like you have all these America First people rising up in 2020 or 2018 in the midterms. You have like 65 Republican Senate seats, and then Tucker Carlson becomes president in 2024. It's a threat on Atlas. It's like a nightmare scenario. It's written by a liberal, but it's kind of awesome at the same time, come to think about it. But and yeah, it's not something that would entirely be true. If Trump lost in 2016, the GOP would do everything they could do to purge any existence of Trumpism, even though he may have been one of the only candidates on that stage of 17, if not the only one who would have defeated Hillary in retrospect for various reasons. But that's beside the point. You have people that say Kasich would have won because he was up in the polls, and it's like, yeah, he wasn't being attacked at all. That doesn't exactly mean that he would have won if he was on the debate stage with Hillary Clinton. You understand how these things work. He would have got walked over, and he'd be an anti-turnout machine in many places. American Patriots is, what do you think about Robert Kennedy Jr. for VP? Well, he's still a liberal, make no mistake. He is somebody who is intriguing on some issues, no doubt about it, for a Democrat, but he is still very much a liberal, and he'll get attacked because he doesn't really like the jab so much. And I mean, I consider that to be a net positive thing, but at the same time, what will it amount to? The Dem primary is easy. We have a video about, or the Dem primary is interesting. Have a video about that on the website for members only if you guys want to check it out. But the Jaded Kriegsman says, I think part of the problem most people have is they view state and local gov as junior varsity, and federal gov is the varsity. We need capable people at both levels, especially in Minnesota. The party here sucks. Well, I would say it'd be like high school football is like a local, and then state is like college, and then federal is like the NFL. I think it's very similar to that. And the presidential election is the Super Bowl. And honestly, it's like you're not going to have capable people at the federal level if you don't exactly have capable people in, high school football that are eventually going to be in the NFL or whatever. Same concept. And just because you're good in high school or college doesn't mean you're going to be good in the NFL. I've made that distinction with the whole Desantis thing. Oh, make him president. It doesn't always vibe like that. It doesn't always turn out that way. But I don't know. I will say that your local politics also impacts your life a lot more than state, which impacts your life a lot more than federal in many cases. I'm not saying federal politics is not important, but just taking over local Republican parties is enough of a big step in and of itself. But we need people who are capable, people that know what they're doing. You have a lot of people that have good intentions, but do they know what they're doing? Not necessarily. And I mean, you kind of see that even in parties like Michigan right now. And just because you have people that are, they're like based on this, or they said this base thing, and they're not even that based when you look into it. And it's like, okay, whatever. But you need competency as well. Both matter. You need people that are capable of winning a primary and a general as well. That part is true. Competence, but also you need people that are solid and actually represent the best interest of the base and hold those principles very dear to their hearts, and not just grift in a primary, then abandon their voter base in a general. Doomsday Machine says Trump or bust. I trust Trump and only Trump for foreign policy, fighting for the establishment and upholding conservative populism. 45 must become 45 and 47. This is true when it comes to foreign policy and fighting the establishment. I mean, Trump is your guy. If you want somebody who's going to go out there, pass remedial legislation that could have been passed in a Mitt Romney 2012 administration, go ahead. DeSantis is your guy. I mean, that's pretty much it. That's the takeaway. Like, you could either have a just standard conservative politician that might, get a few more bills through than your average past Republican president, that might not be as interventionist as Bush, but we don't even know. Bush was the populist on war in 2000. Gore was the warmonger. Bush was, the more, I wouldn't say isolationist, but less interventionist type. That's why he won New Hampshire in 2000 and then lost it in 2004. There are levels to this stuff right here. Lions 1956 says Herschel would be a good... No, he would not. I don't think we need to cover that. Knight says Trump's attacks on DeSantis made him look like a lib and hurt him much more than helped him. I don't even know if I agree. He's the one going up in the polls right now. I think it depends on the attack line. Trump's going to come out with a lot of out-of-pocket attacks, and some people are going to say, oh, he's fallen off. But it's like he's always done that. That's been a part of his brand, and a lot of the time it's funny. If I scratch my head at something, it's because it's just not funny. And that's what it comes down to. The whole meatball, which he doesn't even say, that's like AstroTurf. I don't even know if he came up with it, but it is pretty funny. I mean, the guy gets red in the face. He is Italian. Like, you're going to just sit up here and like moral grandstand about how, oh, it's so awful to like make jokes. Like, no, it's not. It's not. It's funny. It's kind of funny. But I mean, there are some things that he'll say that are a little head scratching from time to time, that look like, what are you doing at 3 a.m. putting out the statement? He called Joe Biden scammer Joe Biden, and he's like said it with like one M. It's like, what the hell? What's a scammer? But I don't even know. I don't even know if he puts these out or what the deal is. But most of the time, like, that's highlighting the flaws here. You're spending time highlighting the flaws, the very few. And it's like you're trying to do that at the same time, when these people are going to call you, no matter what you say or what you do, a Blumph cultist, because you think that he might be the best option in 2024. I don't know. Just look at the vitals, look at the details. It's pretty obvious. It doesn't mean he's going to save this country or that he's perfect or anything like that, but we need to take a step forward here. And then they'll be like, oh, well, no, I agree, but it's about electability. And then you talk about how DeSantis is not that electable given stances he has. And you talk about how Trump came within 43,000 votes of winning at a time that was awful politically for any Republican president to win. And then they go back to the, oh, he's bad, he can't do this, DeSantis is the greatest. And then you debunk that. Then they'll mention, oh, it's electability, he can't win. And they'll go back. It's like, yeah, whatever. The polls are pretty much even between Trump and DeSantis against Biden. DeSantis does do better among independents, that's true. But when you adjust for like turnout, enthusiasm, etc., it's pretty much even. And who knows if he'll keep those margins because there's so many undecided voters when you poll DeSantis against Biden. He's not like this charismatic figure that's going to sweep the nation and get all those people on his side. It's like the DeSantis cultists, which is the term they use, are far more cultish. They don't exist in big numbers in the real world, although they exist online. And I presume that not every single person in the real world who prefers DeSantis is doing so for malicious reasons. But a lot of these people, you see the way they act, and it's like, yeah, they're not on the same team. They sound like resist libs from 2017. They're not people that actually care about saving this country. They have zero principle, or they have zero loyalty to principle, and they attack Trump for not having enough loyalty to principle. And it's like, whatever. Okay, Lions 1956. His thoughts on Jill Biden inviting Iowa to the White House. I don't know why. Was that like a sports event thing that they won or something? I mean, I personally don't care. Tracking the core of stuff and more. Lowell says we need Chris Christie to win. He could win a weight gain competition. Maybe. Lions 1956 says Ron could run for House after his term, then president. I don't think he'd go down to the House. I think if anything, he would go to the Senate. If anything, he might consider running if like Rubio retires, and he might be decent in that role. But if he's going to be cozying up with these donors, he's going to lose a lot more of his clout within authentic conservative circles, even circles that are not exactly that fond of Trump. And then you have like, it's weird because you have these populists or these so-called populist people. And you know who they are if you spend time on Twitter. But the populist people, or they were like really populist. They used that term back in like 2020, even before then. And they're the ones out there just like shilling for DeSantis, even though DeSantis is like the least populist candidate in this race. And he's, like I said, not even that electable when it comes down to it. Nothing says populist like somebody who wants to cut Social Security and Medicare and has a very mixed record on foreign policy and has supported free trade, even when Donald Trump was putting tariffs and he was running for governor with Trump's endorsement. He said he disagreed with Trump's position on tariffs, even though he kind of changed the subject, but still. The Kupithican Age says who DeSantis chooses VP if he wins the RNC. I don't know. Probably Glenn Youngkin, honestly, which, again, he's not the worst VP choice, but you're going to need somebody who's going to have base appeal. He'd be wise to choose somebody who would get Trump's base out while being an asset on the ticket. I don't know who that person would exactly be. Endeavor 25 says, how is Georgia turning blue and Kemp wins by 8? I don't know. How is California turning blue and Pete Wilson was winning the state? I mean, it's a little bit deeper than that. You're an incumbent governor, and up and down the ballot, you saw different results. The only federal election that was on the ballot, Republicans lost. Now, Walker was not the best candidate, more likely than not, but still, they still lost it. So it's deeper than that. John Waffle H2P says thoughts on David Hogg acting insane on Twitter. I mean, that's just another day. He does that all the time. Why would I even pay attention? I haven't seen any recent developments. If he's done something recently that's dumb, let's see. Knight says thoughts on ABL supporting DeSantis over. I don't know. I haven't watched that guy in years. I don't even know if I'm still subbed. Nick H says, who is the worst electabro after Rufus? There's a lot of annoying people on Twitter. I don't know if you could say one is a worst one. Rufus, I mean, he's just a lol cow. He's just a big lol cow to the point where you can't even hate him 100% of the time. Yesterday for Easter, which by the way, hope everyone had a happy Easter. The GOP Twitter account put out a message that was like happy Easter. It was devoid, didn't have like a cross in it or anything, which was arguably a problem. It's a religious holiday first and foremost. A lot of the base is Christian, and no, putting a cross in an Easter celebration thing does not alienate it doesn't alienate any voters. All right, let's be real here. And they literally put Kwanzaa things out there for Kwanzaa. They put out Ramadan. They'll have the crescent moon. But they didn't even put a cross. If anything, that's arguably something that is an issue in and of itself. This Rufus guy was mad that they put out an Easter celebration at all and was seething, even though they have like a couple Easter eggs in it and they say it's happy Easter. He's seething. He's like, it's going to be a theocrat party. It's like, you're an idiot, dude. You're just an idiot. You're a piece of garbage just for looking at that and then just like using it as an opportunity to attack the voters of this party. It's like, what are you even here for at this point? Because it's not like people like that exist in the real world anyways. People like Rufus. I mean, there's a lot of characters out there that you'll meet and find, but Rufus is an interesting guy. Sam Madsen says, I can't believe people actually think abortion is why your farmer in Hickston, Wisconsin didn't vote in 2022 or for Kelly or maybe even voted Democrat. No, abortion's not a big issue either way in like the driftless area in Wisconsin. Like, this is what people get confused. Some people will say, oh, these areas are socially liberal. And then some will say that they're like diehard conservatives. And it's like, the answer is that they're just populist. I don't think that they care strongly about like traditional Republican issues like abortion, but they do care a lot about trade. They care a lot about the American identity, what kind of country we are. And Trump really spoke to them on that issue more so than pretty much anybody ever really had. And that's why he did so well in those places. Lions 1956 says, will Kemp run for Senate and will he win? It's possible. If you have a Biden midterm in 2026, I think that at that point, Brian Kemp would probably win that Senate race there, maybe, or he would stand a chance if he has a popularity above a certain level as a governor, although Democrats are going to dump everything to protect one of their 2028 leaders in Ossoff. Also, why is Herschel running for president? Funny, because the guy couldn't win a Senate seat in a red year and underperformed the whole entire state ticket by a decent amount. Zachary Marintet says, yeah, I know it's not good for so many Republicans to move to Republican states, but I'm in West Washington and I might just have to move to Idaho if I want to date a woman who wants marriage, kids, etc. Well, that's different. I think if you're fleeing like a blue state or Seattle and you're going to be moving into like a Republican state, it's a little bit different than fleeing a swing state, which again, I know I'm kind of hypocritical by saying that, but still. Sam Harrison says, do you think Trump has a better chance of winning Pennsylvania or Georgia? Probably Pennsylvania. It really depends on a lot of things. He's got to get that Rust Belt energy up there, but only he can do it. Only he can. Like, we're going to have to find a way after him. Obviously, he's not going to be around forever. You're going to have an operation. But in the meantime, 2024, to build that operation, he's the main one that can do it. But after that, we're going to have to look into it. DJ Aftershocks has got body slammed at Chipotle by an agnostic black trans they them until I told them I support DeSantis. They despise Trump but obsess over DeSantis. Yeah, that's how people think that the average like liberal or even like independent voter thinks. Like, oh, this person, they hate Donald Trump, but they'd crawl over broken glass to vote for Ron DeSantis. It's like, a lot of the time, it's like, who's DeSantis? Like, I hear stories about Electa bros, they go out to dinner, they have a few drinks, and then they're obsessing about politics when they're drinking, and then they ask the waitress if they like Ron DeSantis, and they're like, "Who the hell is Ron DeSantis?" I mean, this is stories that I've heard from people, and we know who these people are. But like the average person out there, or the Uber driver, they get in the Uber, and it's like some Somalian guy or whatever, some guy who doesn't even speak English. Do you like DeSantis? Or would you vote for DeSantis? Oh, I don't know, maybe. And then they tweet, my Uber driver is going to vote for Ron DeSantis. He's a Muslim. He's a liberal, whatever. It's like, no. Oh, no. It's over. It is Jover for these people. Based Katos' thoughts on the Tennessee congressman expulsion. If I believe that's the Democrats that got expelled for like egging on the liberal rioters or whatever. I mean, yeah, I mean, good if that's the case. That's good. They try to do that to us in the U.S. Capitol. Let's do that effectively to them where we have the power. Make sure that Tennessee doesn't become the next Texas, because with whatever is happening in Nashville, that could be, I wouldn't say that Tennessee would ever be at risk of flipping, but like the Nashville area, like that district that's currently held by Andy Ogles, like you want to keep him there because he's like one of the best new congressmen that we added in this disappointing election cycle. Knight says Trump calling DeSantis an average governor and complaining about Social Security literally got Nikki Fried to retweet it. Even his own rally was silent when he said that. Well, the average governor thing, I don't know if that's the best tagline. I think that he's going to have to diminish his record as usual in order to keep his base in check. I will say that. At the same time, the Social Security thing, that's 100% valid, especially in a party where you have a lot of old people. You're losing older people. A lot of candidates mentioned cutting or privatization this cycle, and they underperformed. Like Masters in particular. Was it a little bit out of context? Yeah, but when you get outspent 7-1, get no help by the party, you're not going to be able to respond. I mean, the guy literally had to cut like 90% of his staff for the general election because Mitch McConnell wouldn't give the guy any money. And obviously he lost. But when you look at everything, maybe his performance is a little bit impressive, all things considered. But no, I personally don't care if Nikki Fried wants to meddle and retweet. I don't think that makes Trump sound like a liberal. Overall, average governor. I mean, there are arguably better governors on the right wing than Ron DeSantis. They don't get enough credit, like John Forte up in Montana, McMaster in South Carolina. But I mean, let's be real. I personally think that he's just going to have to attack him. He's going to have to say like, no, your reason to run against me is not valid. And you need to go in Florida and deal with your problems. So that's basically what I would say. If I was Donald Trump, so I'm not like fully against him saying it. If he's going to be like, he's a terrible governor 24/7, it'll just seem like, yeah, maybe he is threatened a little bit, but he's not threatened. And the statement like the one I just covered was perfect, dead on perfect. Let's see. Alex Peace, his thoughts on ranked choice voting in Nevada. Could it help us there? I mean, it depends. Like in Georgia, one could say ranked choice would help us more than not if you have like no runoff and the libertarians all go for the Republican side of things. But I don't know. Personally, I don't like the idea overall. I don't like the idea. I will say that the jungle primaries up in Alaska are far more of an issue than something such as ranked choice voting, because then you have Republicans running up against other Republicans, and that system is in place solely to protect Lisa Murkowski and nothing else. FM 32047 says Youngkin for Virginia Senate 2024, long shot but possible. No, he'll stay governor. That's an uphill climb race right there. We'll discuss these Senate elections, and I probably am not going to get into it as much as we initially planned. But what I will say is you're going to be able to go out there with Trump on the ticket. You're going to instantly get West Virginia, Ohio, Montana. You have more of a chance in Wisconsin than you would not have. And you could run somebody who will outperform him, but also benefit from Trump's presence. And then Arizona, Trump's going to get more than 46%, 47%, right? Yeah, he's going to need somebody who's going to run with him in the state, and you can win that three-way race. Because if Trump is going to go out there and even if he loses Arizona by 4, gets 47 or 47.5 to whatever, if the Senate candidate runs with him and gets like 46, 47, that may be enough to defeat both Gallego and Sinema. Sinema's going to get a lot of funding, even though her campaign is going literally nowhere in the general. And that's the way it is. Cami Crombie says thoughts on the Dalai Lama controversy. I saw that. It's very strange. I'm not going to get into it, but it was a repulsive video to say the least. And I don't know how you would explain that. Nick H says, would a DeSantis Hawley ticket be able to win Pennsylvania? Maybe in 2028, not in 2024 with a divisive primary like this. Matthew Pacheco says, Pedro Gonzalez has become such a shill for Ron DeSantis that I can't listen to him anymore. I mean, it's true. The guy's like the populist type of guy. And all he does is he shills for DeSantis. He just shills so hard against Donald Trump. And it's like, what is his real end game here? What's his end game? Because the guy is just a total shill. He goes out there and it's just constantly tweet after tweet, Trump bad, Trump bad, Trump bad. The guy used to be this like ideologue who is like this economic populist or whatever, and he's just not that anymore. So, yeah, it is what it is. Knight says, should Trump's VP be John Bradshaw Layfield? I don't know who that is. Nick H says, J.D. Vance has exceeded all expectations, and he should be the nominee in 2028. Yeah, I mean, I would not be opposed to that. Definitely a long way to go between now and then, but I'm not going to sit up here and say, oh, just because he's like a first-term senator, you can't have him on the ticket. Whatever. Peter Duca, a message retracted. Thank you. John Waffle H2P says Pennsylvania and Wisconsin is the key to the election. This is true. You can't win with just Arizona and Georgia. You can win without them. If you get Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, it's basic math. It's basic math. Sam Madsen says, why does moderate always have to mean fiscally conservative and socially liberal rather than the other way around? Because you have a society that views the gauge of moderate relatively socially liberal. That's how it is. Economically speaking, they tend to be more capitalist and more globalist. And if you manage to, combine some more populist policy that may be considered left among some of these like far, libertarian type of groups, yeah, I mean, they're not going to consider it moderate. They'll just call you the fascist, opposing democracy, whatever. All their buzzwords out there. Knight says, come on, man. If a lib retweeted something DeSantis said, would you honestly brush that off? And Biden will attack Trump on Social Security and endorsing Paul Ryan too. Well, no, Biden's not going to attack Trump for Paul Ryan. He's not going to attack DeSantis for Paul Ryan either. And Trump's record on Social Security is a lot better than DeSantis's. And his dirt he'll be attacked for is going to be a lot more frivolous. But they take the bait anyways, even if he has said some questionable things about it. But mainly what we see is that DeSantis's record in Congress, he was defined as a fiscal hawk. He was defined as somebody who wanted to cut those entitlements. When it comes down to Donald Trump, Trump is a guy who's viewed more as a populist. He won in 2016 talking about protecting Social Security. He didn't touch it really in 2020 either way. If anything, him like cutting the payroll tax temporarily because of COVID may actually have ended up hurting him in the end, may have actually made that difference up, that 43,000 alone. But he can pivot, he could attack him on the primary, and the attacks are going to bounce off more because he would define himself as that candidate who was more pro-protecting the entitlements. But if a liberal retweeted something DeSantis said, would I brush it off? I mean, it depends. Obviously, Nikki Fried is no friend of Donald Trump. That's pretty obvious. And if they're going to be retweeting Trump or any of his surrogates, it's more just funny than anything else. And I care more about Bush and the Bushes and Bill Kristol and some of these other people, these neocons, retweeting DeSantis more than I care about a liberal retweeting DeSantis, because they've been trying to pin the two against each other for so long. And it worked to an extent. But that's been happening for years and years and years on end. And I think Beto did the same thing, the Lion Ted thing back in 2018, a little bit, called him Lion Ted during the debate. So I think it's a little bit different, but I'm not really concerned with liberals retweeting DeSantis, because liberals have their own takes on this. I was one of those people when the whole did he got endorsed by Soros or whatever. He didn't get endorsed by Soros, but Soros would rather likely have DeSantis as president, because you talk about his record of the Open Society Foundation. DeSantis has got some loose ties to the WEF, very similar stuff there with some of his advisors, even if he might verbally attack the WEF, but that's what it comes down to. All right. Cami Crombie says thoughts on Massey backing DeSantis. Well, again, he's very libertarian on economic issues. And DeSantis is somebody who was a part of that Freedom Caucus, so it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Anton says thoughts on beating it up. I really don't understand what that means. I know it's a meme. I've seen it in chats around. I don't know what beating it up means. I guess it just means to just beat it up, I guess. I don't know. I still don't know what it means. Literally, God says, reminder, Romney won the Indies and still lost. And this is true. And if Trump got just, 43,000 across 3 states, he would have lost the Indies and won. And it depends. It's all about turnout. This is a new era of politics. That's what it comes down to. But all right, last call for Super Chats. It is getting very late. It is 12:30 a.m. on the East Coast, 11:30 in Central Time. Yeah, what does beating? I don't know what beating it up means. I see it in chats. I see the emojis. I don't know. I don't really know what it actually means, but we'll see. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it when it comes down to 2024. Another 2024 stream. We're probably going to be doing a lot of them between now and the end of the primary, because it's only going to get worse from here, the divide. And if they really go down this road, but I will say you did see a lot of people in the DeSantis bro sphere, and they're seething because they're oh, it's over. We're going to lose the country. We're going to lose the primary. They're attacking the primary voters. And it's well, maybe it's because you suck and they know what you're up to and they know that you're fake. That's why. John Waffle H2P says, what future candidate do you think will save this country? Somebody who has not shown their face yet, at least to the real general public, your everyday person, somebody that less than 10%, if not even 1% of people would actually know. And I think that that's something that people need to understand. It's a long fight that we're going to see between now and when we actually do take back this country, which may not even happen within our lifetimes. And I think people need to come to grips with that. But at the same time, you're going to have to get the ball rolling now, move it down the field, or you're just not going to have a chance whatsoever. Peter Duca says DeSantis is far more than conservative than Trump on marriage, guns, crime, and taxes. Trump has moved the GOP to the left on the alphabet issues. I mean, that part is true, and that's already baked into the cake necessarily. Doesn't really matter how you chalk it up. Guns, I wouldn't even agree with that, because you have red flag laws in Florida. You see gun control measures proposed by DeSantis back in 2019, even in Florida. So I'd say they're about even on guns. Crime, DeSantis voted for the First Step Act, by the way, which a lot of people will blame Trump for, rightfully so, because it was an L. It was an L he took. But still, I don't even know if that's true. I mean, crime, the only difference is as a governor, he squashed the riots. Okay. Trump signed off on it, or he sent the National Guard down to Florida because DeSantis signed off on it. Tim Walz didn't. Should he have sent them anyways? Yes, he should have. That's beside the point. Taxes, I'd say they're about the same. Marriage, I mean, do you think DeSantis is going to have any say on, I assume you mean gay marriage. If you're saying oh, well, DeSantis has only been married once and Trump has been I don't care what they do necessarily in their personal lives. If you're talking about what is going to make a better president or not, somebody that goes out there, has multiple wives at different times, and is like old, is like a celebrity who like was initially from that club and defected. Like, you're really going to sit back there and expect me to care about that? Which I'm not saying that's what the super chat was saying, but if you're talking about like the gay marriage issue, I'm not necessarily that positive if DeSantis is like that far more conservative on that issue. He definitely has been pushing against like the indoctrination in schools and things like that, which is good. But you look at the fact that Trump releases these policy statements, and maybe you could say DeSantis pushed him to the right on the issue so he could like capitalize on it in the primary. But still, like, Trump was the first one to really bring that to the forefront with the whole 1776 commission. And oh, he got hate from these people too because he saw it on Tucker and that's bad for some reason. Oh, okay, whatever. I don't care. It is what it is. But that's it. We're going to end the stream. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell. I'll see you guys in the next one. Red Eagle out.